What's up, friends? Happy Thursday. Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow that podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for those of you who have already subscribed. If you haven't, now's a great time to do so. Thank you for those of you who have become Pack-A-Day Podcast YouTube members. Appreciate that as well. We had two more today, Koa Ulrich and Matt Hilonic. Thank you guys so much for signing up. Make sure to check those out. Bonus content, extra videos, extra Q&As, first access to every single video. You're going to want to check those out, so make sure to do so. We had some major news for the Packers on Wednesday. Thyrick Pitts was in fact released with an injury settlement. So that stint from going from released with an injury designation to placed on IR to being released with an injury settlement didn't take long. He's no longer on the roster, and they quickly got that injury settlement figured out. Before we get to our main topic for today, which is going to be the Evan Williams deep dive, I quickly want to go over yesterday's Tyron Hopper deep dive. I'll just say this. I quickly saw in the comments, and obviously I got a lot of great comments as well, but I saw in the comments that they're like, oh my goodness, Andy went all in on this guy, or like, wow, this guy sucks. Like, what is, like, how did the Packers draft this guy? And like, wow, I've never seen Andy be so negative. It's always really funny to me. And one thing, and this is just a random aside, going to bed every night after posting a video to 1 a.m. and then going to bed and then waking up at 7:30 every single morning, or 8 or whenever I get up, and every morning, and having no idea what the reaction is going to be to the video that's been up there for a couple hours already is always a little bit interesting, and always a little bit like nerve-wracking of like, oh my goodness, did I flub a name? Did I say something stupid? Did I say something wrong? Or just like what the reaction was. My honest thought going as I posted that video yesterday was that this was kind of like every other video that I posted. Here's the strengths. Here's the weaknesses. Here are the things that he needs to accentuate with those strengths and really cut back on from a weaknesses standpoint if he wants to become a really good NFL player. And obviously, I talked about the tackling pretty significantly, and you saw the statistics from PFF. And I stand by. I went back and actually watched a little bit of it again. And yes, he falls off some of those tackles and has the opportunity to make some plays and just doesn't make them. Do think it got a little bit better in that last season at Missouri towards the end, but overall, you see some of the tackling issues. But it's always interesting because, again, I didn't think it was that much different than the Marshawn Lloyd one, where I said, like, hey, if he doesn't clean up the fumbles in the pass pro, he's not going to get on the field, and it's just going to be a non-starter. And it's sort of the same thing with Tyron Hopper, where like you have to clean up some of that tackling. And then I'm like, after like I saw the comments, I'm like, all right, am I just off on this? So I wanted to go out. So I look. So Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, says, quote, in his scouting report, needs to improve his tackle security. Dane Brugler, quote, needs to tighten his tackling form, often giving the ball carrier an opening to shake or stiff arm him, slides off ball carriers, and his finishing strength as a tackler is mediocre, will overrun his angles and create cutback opportunities for runners. Greg Cassell, who I think is the most underrated person doing this in the world. He's been doing it for so long, and he's so freaking good at it. Quote, missed tackles in run game on plays that were his to make, did not come to balance effectively in the hole. And then an AFC scout from Bob McGinn's whole draft series said, quote, limited play strength, falls off a lot of tackles. So this was not like some crazy thing that I was just pulling out of thin air. But here's what I will tell you. I will always tell you, good, bad, or ugly, what I'm seeing. And you can disagree with that. That is totally fine. Nobody has to agree with me. I'm not the be-all, end-all. I'm not right about everything. I get some things wrong sometimes. No question about it. Wouldn't be the first time. Certainly will not be the last. But I promise you, I'm going through, I am putting the work in, I'm viewing the tape, I'm viewing everything that I possibly can, and I'm giving you my personal honest assessments. If I would have went back and Lance Zierlein and Dane Brugler and Greg Cassell and this random AFC scout all would have said greatest tackler in the world, I still would have stood by what I believed. So yeah, I'm going to tell you exactly what my opinion is of it. And that's why I go through it and watch all the all 22 and give you my opinion before I look at any of that other stuff. The other thing is I truly legitimately really liked what I saw out of him from rookie minicamp. In fact, if you remember my Friday report, he was the first guy that I mentioned. And it doesn't necessarily mean anything when you're in shorts and, you know, not pads and not tackling, and it's a rookie minicamp and everything's vanilla. But he was the guy that really stood out to me. I'm actually legitimately excited about Tyron Hopper and what he can bring to the team. And I'll say again, like, if he can just kind of firm up his tackling a little bit, I think he could end up being a steal as a third-round pick. I think there's absolutely a way to utilize him and use him. But as we go through these and we kind of go from first-round pick Jordan Morgan all the way to seventh-round pick and undrafted guys, have to remember too, theoretically, these breakdowns are probably going to get worse. We're going from first round guys, second round guys to eventually, late day 2, day 3 and undrafted type players. The scouting reports are probably going to have more flaws on them as we go along. If there weren't, they would have been first and second round guys. So there's a part of that as well. And then the last thing I'll say here is, regardless of what you think of, my breakdown or anything like that, as I mentioned, just know I'm going to tell you the truth. And the other thing is, if you're thinking, wow, he was like hard on Hopper, well, just remember, those same set of eyes was watching the same tape when I was watching Edgerrin Cooper and Javon Bullard and Marshawn Lloyd, where apparently those breakdowns were very positive and exciting. And just know that, hey, if I'm using the same way to critique and sometimes a player gets a little bit of a harsher critique, just remember that the ones that did not, well, that probably tells you a little bit about them as well. But regardless of what happens, my breakdown, some random AFC scouts, the Packers, anyone's are not going to define what ultimately Tyron Hopper becomes, or Evan Williams, or any of these other breakdowns that we do. The goal of these is not to define who the player is going to be completely. The goal is to define in these deep dives what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and how they can affect this Packers team right away. What are some things they can immediately bring to the table? And then what we really sort of have to remember here for all of these are all really, really talented football players. Like, regardless if you thought it was a player who got drafted too high or too low, was a steal, was a value, was a reach, any of it, they're all extremely talented football players. And they hold in their own hands how good they will be. If any of these players work extremely hard and mitigate those weaknesses and work on their strengths and accentuating those strengths, they will go on to be very good players in the NFL. And if any of these players, regardless of where they were drafted or how talented they are, don't put the work in, don't put that time in, they will fail out of the league, or at least not reach their potential at best. So this is just to say where they're at and what they need to do to become a great NFL player. And like I said, I'll just say it one more time. I like Tyron Hopper. I'm really excited, and I will certainly be cheering him on one way or the other. But just know that that is the goal of this. It's not to tear anyone down. It's not to bring anyone up. It's just to give you my fair and honest evaluation. And that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Take it or leave it. And now we're going to do our Evan Williams fair and honest evaluation. And we'll go and we'll do the rest of them until we get to undrafted guys. And then we'll go on and talk about other stuff, because it's really fun to talk about this stuff. And that's what we enjoy doing. And that's probably why you're here. So let's do it. Evan Williams, 5'11", 200-pound safety out of Oregon, also spent 4 years at Fresno State, was a fifth-year senior, turns 23 in July. So interestingly enough, despite the fifth-year senior, despite playing in 52 games, starting in 45 games, still only 22 right now and doesn't turn 23 until July, which is great. When you have that experience, but you're still young, that's a good combo to have. He has 30.125-inch arms, which are short. Go figure. They've just drafted a bunch of very short-armed players for the most part. But he does have 10.125-inch hands, which are very, very large hands. So he does have that going for him. Statistically, in 2023, he had 82 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 pass breakup, no interceptions. That was at Oregon. In 2022, for Fresno State, 66 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 1 sack, no forced fumbles, 4 pass breakups, and no interceptions. Over his career, as I mentioned, he played in 52 games. He started 45 games, had 307 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. Remember, 4.5 of those came this past season, 4 forced fumbles, 19 pass breakups, and 4 total interceptions. From a tackling standpoint, in 2023, he had a 13.8 missed tackle percentage. We'll go over what that means more in just a moment. We'll kind of compare it to where that was from an NFL standpoint this past year. But 13.8% missed tackle percentage in 2023. In 2022, he had a 16.0% missed tackle percentage. And for his career, a 15.3% missed tackle percentage. Still a little bit on the high end. He did miss 56 tackles on defense in his career and 25 in the past 2 seasons combined. These numbers per PFF. 15.3% for his career for a missed tackle percentage. If he had that percentage last season in the NFL, that would have put him at 13th most for safeties in the NFL. Just as another comparison's sake, Darnell Savage had the 8th highest missed tackle percentage last year at 17.3%. So again, he's at 15.3 for his college career. Remember, it doesn't get easier to tackle in the NFL. It usually gets harder, but just to kind of put it in comparison, wasn't quite as bad as Darnell Savage was at the NFL level. For again, obviously Evan Williams playing in college, but that's where he would have ranked, again, would have put him at 13th if he was at 15.3 for his career. If he was at 13.8, obviously it's even lower than that. But again, Darnell Savage was at 17.3, just to kind of give you that barometer there. In pass defense, again, per PFF, in 2023, he was targeted 37 times, gave up 27 receptions for a 73% completion percentage, 218 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, 2 pass breakups, a 96.5 passer rating, and did have 1 penalty in coverage. In 2022, he was targeted only 17 times, did give up 14 completions for an 82.4% completion percentage, 160 yards, but no touchdowns, no interceptions, 2 pass breakups, and a 105.9 passer rating with no penalties. Over his career, he was targeted 118 times for 78 completions, 66.1% completion percentage for 1,003 yards, only 2 touchdowns given up in his entire career, which is pretty impressive, had 4 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, an 84.1 passer rating, and 3 total penalties. All right, from an athletic standpoint, had an 8.20 relative athletic score. I think this is actually, and he did everything, by the way. He's one of the rare players who tested everything. So kudos to him for doing that. But I think this is a number that's worth remembering here. Because a lot of the things that you hear about Evan Williams is that he's not a great athlete. And there is some of that, and we will talk about some of that. But he's still an 82nd percentile safety for, through all the records of players that have gone in and done all the testing. 82nd percentile, we're not talking about a 4.73 relative athletic score. We're not talking about a 2.18 relative athletic score here. Like some of the players in this draft class had. Cam Kinchins had a poor RAS. Tyler Nubin, partly due to injury, had a poor RAS. We're not talking about that. It's still an 8.2, 82nd percentile athlete at the safety position. So it's not like he's some bum here. He's a really good athlete still, no question about it. 39th percentile height, 55th percentile in weight, 80th percentile in the bench press, 96th percentile in the vertical jump, 87th percentile in the broad jump, 53rd percentile in the 40-yard dash with a 4.6 40, even, 4.6 flat, 93rd percentile in the short shuttle, and 49th percentile in the 3-cone. So a little bit lower in the 3-cone, just a little bit below average there, below average height at 39th percent, but some really good numbers in the bench press, the vertical, the broad jump, and in the short shuttle. So like I said, this is not your awful athlete by any means, 8.20 overall RAS. All right, by PFF standards, in 2023, he had a 76.0 grade on 744 snaps. In 2022, he had a 77.1 grade on 584 snaps. 2021, he had a 79.6 grade on 813 total snaps. 2020, he had a 58.7 grade on 283 snaps. And in 2019, had a 64.4 grade on 406 snaps. Maybe as importantly, he had 466 career special team snaps, including 200 coverage snaps. I talked about that a little bit yesterday in my Hopper breakdown of, yes, it's great to have special team snaps, but you really want to see those coverage snaps. Those are the ones where are a little bit more important, high impact, and definitely can make a much bigger difference when you're becoming a quote unquote core special teams guy. You want to be able to be used on coverage. Also had an 89.5 special teams grade in 2022 and a 90.5 special teams grade in 2020. A lot of times you don't see really high special teams grade. He had 2 seasons with very, very high special teams grade, in part because he did have a blocked punt in one of those seasons, and he had a blocked extra point in a different one of those seasons, but he came up with some impact plays from a special team standpoint. All right, let's get to our positives and negatives with Evan Williams, starting with the positives. Number 1, he is a legitimate leader on the field. He was a multiple-time captain at Fresno State. He was already at rookie minicamp, calling out plays, communicating with people, and getting everyone set up the right way, just in a very minuscule amount of time that he had to learn some stuff, in a very minuscule time that we had to observe him at rookie minicamp. You could tell he was already communicating out on the field and becoming a leader out amongst his rookie peers right away. It showed up immediately. And It's funny that he is wearing that number 33 because number 33, Aaron Jones, was always talked about as like the heartbeat of the offense and the heartbeat of the team and things like that. There are times at Fresno State, you could see he was like the heartbeat of that defense. And even a little bit at Oregon, but especially at Fresno State, he was the guy. And he plays with his hair on fire. He plays the right way, and he is doing all the little things, playing at 100 miles per hour, and he's leading not only vocally, not only being a team captain, but he's leading by example. When you've got your team captain, when you've got a guy that's out there, with that sort of leadership responsibility and is willing to take that on, when he plays that fast and that hard, it's going to garner obviously the praise and the just the respect of the teammates, and they're going to want to play the same way, is I guess what I'm trying to say here. So he has that natural innate leadership ability. This is somebody that I think can be not only a potential defensive captain over time, but potentially a special teams captain as well. And he just kind of carries himself in that way. And it shows up on tape at Oregon, at Fresno State, and it even showed up in a little bit of time that we got to see him in rookie minicamp. Next, football intelligence and instincts. And a variety of things show up here. Number one, he is constantly around the football. He just finds his way regardless of where he's lined up. Doesn't matter if he's in the box, in the slot, post safety, doesn't matter. He finds his way around the football. And a lot of times it's because he's rallying to the football. He never gives up on a play. He's going everywhere he needs to go, and he's constantly working his way to get there. And this shows up a lot where, he's gang tackling people. He's around the football for pass breakups. And there's a play where he's post safety on the opposite side of the field. Quarterback does a great job of looking him off in one direction, takes a step to that direction. Quarterback comes back, throws the opposite way. He beelines it from his safety position over to that spot. The corner gets beat on the play. And he kind of gets not beat, but he just, because he took that step the other way because the quarterback did a great job of looking him off, he's just never going to get to that spot on the field. He gets there maybe a half second late, but the corner does a great job of, kind of staying involved in the play. But he comes over, and just as he's about to complete that completion, he rakes the ball out, and it becomes an incomplete pass. He doesn't complete the reception. And those are the type of plays that you see constantly from Evan Williams, is just working his way to the football. And like at every end of play, you're like looking at yep, Evan Williams involved in the play again in some capacity. He's consistently making the correct reads and run fits. He will come screaming up to make those plays. If this were a player that was playing that too high safety, I've talked a lot about some of these players where if we were talking a Joe Barry system, it just wouldn't work. Evan Williams, in my opinion, works in a Joe Barry system. This is a player who comes down, understands the run fits, understands how to fill those lanes and alleys, and understands how to plug them up and make sure that he knows all of the cutback lanes and where those running backs can go. So he's got that going for him as well, just understanding the run fits and where running backs like to cut back into. He takes smart angles to the football. He understands run fits and cutback lanes, just like I was saying. He's very quick to diagnose and trigger. We talk about, or I should say Jeff Hafley talked about how he wants his players playing fast. And in order to play fast, you have to know what's going on in front of you so you can quickly play at 100 miles an hour. And you don't have to constantly be thinking and having it bogged down where you just got this paralysis by analysis and you're just kind of constantly calculating things. And because your brain's going so fast and trying to figure out what could happen, what should happen, what you should do, and all these different scenarios, you're like, basically it's like an if-then situation, and you're just going through 20 if-thens in your head. If you know what's going to happen and you can diagnose it and read it, you can go play fast. And that's what you see from Evan Williams, is he knows what's going to happen. He understands the play. He understands where he's supposed to be. And then he quickly triggers, diagnoses what's happening, and goes and makes a play on the ball in some capacity. And then he just has, in my opinion, a very natural feel for the game. And it just seems like something, I forget who was talking about this recently. I think it was Nick Saban. Who was talking about this, where he says, you look at all these measurements, the height, weight, speed, the 40 time, and all these things matter. But he's like, the ability, just like a sports instinct, where, he's like a baseball player reacting to a baseball, and how fast and like how quickly the minuscule seconds that you have to react to a baseball. And it's not necessarily anything athletic. It's just it's an instinct that a really great hitter has of how that ball is going to break and how he can get his bat on that ball in some capacity. And it's like he's talking about like you just can't teach some of that stuff. And the greatest of all time just have that unbelievable sports instinct. And that's why so many of these players can play multiple sports and have the great ability to be successful at all of them. There's just a natural sports instinct to them. And that's one of the things, I swear it was Nick Saban. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if I'm thinking of somebody else who said this, but I think it was Saban. And, it seems like that was something that he specifically targeted, when they were recruiting and looking at players. But I feel like Evan Williams has some of that, just this natural sports instinct of where to go, where to be, how to find the football. And it just shows up again on tape in a numerous amount of ways. All right, next up, he plays aggressive attacking football. Stop me if you've heard this before. Edgerrin Cooper plays aggressive attacking football. Tyron Hopper plays aggressive attacking football. Javon Bullard plays aggressive attacking football. Evan Williams plays aggressive attacking football. He's a downhill player in the run game. He's a very talented blitzer. And this is where I actually thought Fresno used Evan Williams a bit better than Oregon did, but Oregon really unlocked him as a blitzer and let him get after the quarterback more. And it worked out with all those sacks this past season. It wasn't just off the edge. He came clean off the edge. And actually, Fresno started doing this in his last season as well with some success. He didn't get the sacks out of it, but they started doing it more, especially towards the end of his time at Fresno State, and it worked well. And then Oregon kind of carried that over. They used him off the edge, but they also used him up the middle. There's this great play where he comes from depth and they're blitzing. There's, I think, a twist inside, and he just comes in and he makes a great play on the quarterback. I think he got the sack on the play. I posted that one on Twitter. But there's another one where he goes right through the running back, doesn't get the sack, but gets the pressure on the play. These are the type of plays that you see. Again, he's a very, very talented blitzer. Stop me if you've heard that before. Edgerrin Cooper, talented blitzer. Tyron Hopper, we talked about that. It was his number one strength was as a blitzer. Javon Bullard, huge strength as a blitzer. And again, Evan Williams, huge strength as a blitzer. These are attacking football players. He has the ability to lay a very strong hit. Posted a play on Twitter where wide receivers going over the middle of the field to catch a pass, and Evan Williams in a very legal way just completely crushes him at the point of contact, gave him the opportunity to turn and see, hits him over the middle, jars that ball loose, and it becomes an incomplete pass. There were a couple other plays too where he is going fast, he is running through the player, and he's making impact tackles and impact hits on the ball carrier, the receiver, whoever it might be. He has good ball skills in zone coverage. We'll talk about man a little bit more, but dropping back into those zones, there's a play that I showed where he was playing zone on one side, or actually it felt like he was actually might be playing man, but he had to scream over to the other side of the field. It almost looked like they weren't trying to tell, or maybe they were trying to trap the opposing team a little bit. But the tight end's on the opposite side running up the seam, and Evan Williams post snap immediately ranges over. And again, whether or not I didn't do the full breakdown of what type of defense they were playing or anything like that, but he ranges over and reads the quarterback's eyes, gets to his point, jumps in front of it, and makes a beautiful interception. This was at his time at Fresno State, but he has that ability to range, and he gets good depth on his zone drops. I think he's very, very good with those ball skills and understanding his drops in zone coverage. As we talked about, special teams ability showed up in numerous ways: big block kicks, big block punts. And as I mentioned earlier, I think he has the ability to be a true legitimate special teams captain for a team. He's constantly rallying to the football, plays at 100 miles per hour. And yes, I do think he has some versatility. I think kind of like we talked about with Javon Bullard, it might be overemphasized a little bit. This is a player that definitely played post safety. He's a player that played too high safety. He's a player who played in the box, and he's a player who played in the slot. He did a little bit of everything, and you love that he's done that at college. Now, we'll talk about in our negative side of things where that versatility fits and where you might be able to play him best, but he definitely showed it in college, and I do think some of that, regardless of where he ends up playing, will carry over at the NFL level. And I do think it's going to give Jeff Hafley a lot of different ways and opportunities in which they can utilize Evan Williams because of that versatility. All right, the negatives. Height, weight, speed. We talk about with every single one of these draft picks, Every single time you're evaluating a player, what do you want? Height, weight, speed. Obviously, there's so much more that goes into it, but it's like one of the first things you're looking for. And he's 5'10", 200, 4'6", 40. He's not a dynamic athlete. He's not a twitched up player. Like I said, I want to reiterate 8.2 RAS. We're not talking about this slow, lethargic, terrible player who just doesn't have the athleticism. He is by far a good enough athlete to play in the NFL. There are no questions about that. But the dynamic playmaking ability, the dynamic athleticism is missing from his game. The stop-start, the ability to change directions or cut on a dime, the ability to have that long speed, which we'll talk about in just a moment, those are the sort of things that are just missing. He's a little on the shorter side. He's got short arms. Those are the things that, and it showed up on a couple plays in tape where he's right there and he's ready to tip away a ball and the wide receiver just high points it a little bit and he just can't get his hands up. And if he's an inch taller, if his arms are an inch longer, he breaks up that pass. But those are the things that are just going to limit him always in some capacity. But you're relying on the fact that he's got these great instincts and these great intangibles. And we talk about all the time, if you could have, look at Darnell Savage. And I don't mean to drag Darnell Savage here by any means, but for a guy who had a 4.3, 4.4 40, whatever it was, super fast, coming out of college, all the dynamic athletic traits, he never had the pure instincts to actually play that fast. There was always a bit of a hesitation. There was always a bit of just sort of allowing things to develop. And he was always a little bit late to come and make those plays. If I had to choose between that and the 4.6 Evan Williams, who is very instinctual, knows where to be, and is going to read plays, diagnose them, and trigger quickly, the 4.6 guy a lot of times is going to play a little bit quicker than maybe even the 4.3 guy will because he's diagnosing things faster. So I don't necessarily hate this. In fact, I like the fact that Green Bay is willing to take a player that does have those instincts, but maybe doesn't have the 9.98 relative athletic score. You need some of those instinctual guys on your defense as well. But there are always going to be some of those limitations because he doesn't have the super high-end 4.3, 4.4, 40 speed. He doesn't have great size, and he's not a super dynamic twitched-up athlete, which is just going to always limit him to some capacity. He's quicker than fast. The two big areas that this shows up is with his long speed and his recovery speed. There's a play against Washington and Michael Penix where I think it's Polk that's just going across the field and he just can't stick with him. And he just doesn't have that speed. It's a long, crossing route, a deep crossing route, and he's just running with him. He just doesn't have quite that speed and Polk just kind of runs away from him. There are other plays where, deep down the field, he's got to turn and go, and he just doesn't have that speed to stay deep quite as much. We talked about that a little bit with Javon Bullard as well in his transitions going backwards. But Evan Williams, very, very similar. And there are other times too where he's kind of running with the player, but the receiver has that ability to close that speed and kind of finish that play and with that closing burst. And Evan Williams just doesn't have that second gear. So if he's beat a little bit, like when we talk about all the time that Eric Stokes play against Jamar Chase against Cincinnati when he had that 4.3 40 speed, and he caught up to it and batted it away. If that receiver or tight end or whoever it is gets separation, he doesn't have that ability to catch up and close that gap in a hurry. Now, he's going to usually get back in the play and probably make the tackle on it far more often than not, but he's not going to go and break up the play if he's already beat on the play. And that long speed, that recovery speed, it will show up as well. And like I said, faster receivers will just unfortunately run right past him. Tackling, not to the same level of Tyron Hopper here, but it definitely is inconsistent. Now, he showed the ability to wrap, to hit hard, to make impact tackles. I also posted a play on Twitter where he comes from depth and he closes. He reads the play perfectly, closes at full speed, and makes this beautiful, picture-perfect teaching tape form tackle on the running back. Just chef kiss perfect, 10 out of 10, no notes. There are other times, there's actually this first game at Oregon, there's 3 or 4 different plays where he's just missing tackles, overrunning a play. I don't know if he was just trying to do too much in his first game in an Oregon uniform to show that hey, I'm here, I'm going to make but he just, I think, tried to do a little bit too much, and there's missed tackles all over the place. And you will see that. And sort of the next thing that I have to talk about here is that last line of defense. I say it probably more than I should, but when you are a safety, you have to put the word safe in safety. You've got to be that last line of defense. You can't get beat. If that ball carrier gets to you, it's already probably going to be a 15, 20-yard play. You can't exacerbate things and now make it a 50, 60, 70, 80-yard touchdown play because you missed the tackle. And those were some plays where he gave up some big plays. He gave up, some just because he couldn't make the play, he couldn't get there athletically, or because he missed the tackle. And some of the short arms too with tackling plays a part of with that as well. So he needs to put that safe in safety and just be a little bit more sure tackling when we get to that level, and making sure that at worst we got to slow that guy down so somebody else can get there and rally to the football as well. So that last line of defense, something that I think he can clean up a little bit. Again, whether it was a missed tackle, poor change of direction, or sometimes his feet just got stuck in mud. And it's interesting that feet got stuck in mud thing, because when I was watching him in minicamp, his feet were constantly moving. So I don't know if that's something the coaches already caught and put on tape and showed him like, hey, we got to keep those feet moving. Or if he saw it himself and he's very cognizant of it and he's working on it, but you could see those feet moving a million miles per hour at rookie minicamp. So hopefully that's going to be something that helps Evan Williams moving forward. Struggles with ball skills and man coverage. There are times where he really struggled to get his head turned and locate the football and had opportunities to bat it away or even make a play on the ball, but he just didn't get his head turned quick enough. So better in zone, not quite as much in man, where he just needs to do a little bit better of a job of locating that football. Lack of impact plays. He has 4 career interceptions in 5 seasons. He has no interceptions and only 1 forced fumble in the past 2 years combined. So if we're talking about a player that's going to come in and make a huge impact, now sometimes those things come in bunches, but you would have liked to see a little bit more of that playmaking ability come through. Now, he did have a lot of sacks this past season, 4.5 of them, but no picks, only 1 forced fumble in the last 2 seasons combined. Talked about the stop-start ability, which he struggles with a little bit. Once he gets that full stop, it's hard for him to get back into that acceleration and get back to full speed. It takes him a little kind of a quick hitch, to kind of get back to where he was and running at full speed again, where some of those players just have that fluidity where they can go from stop to start, stop, and then, immediately go from 0 to 100. He's just got a little bit more of a hiccup there that he doesn't have that premium stop-start ability in the NFL, or what will be in the NFL. Struggles in space a little bit. He will get out-muscled at the catch point, even when he's in perfect coverage. There are a couple times where he's in perfect coverage on the play, and a bigger tight end and wide receiver on 2 distinct plays that I can remember just out-muscled him for the ball. Just went up. They were bigger. They not necessarily stronger per se. Evan Williams is by far strong enough, but they just had the bigger catch radius and just went up and high pointed the ball and just out-muscled them for it. So that's going to happen sometimes. And again, there's just those limitations that show up from time to time, excuse me. And then last but not least, yes, he does have that versatility, but I don't think he's a true slot player in the NFL. And some of that speed concerns would make me believe that. But I think he can play in the slot from time to time. No question about it. I just don't think you want to line him up 60, 70 snaps in the slot, regardless of who he's going against, and just say good luck. I don't think that's going to set him up to succeed. I think he can play post safety, but I don't think that's where he's ultimately going to be best. I think that's your Xavier McKinney. I think that can be Javon Bullard even a little bit more than what it would be in Evan Williams. But can you play him there for 10, 15, maybe even 20 snaps a game? Sure. I don't think there's any concern there, but I don't think it's where you want to play him 60, 70 snaps a game. Then there's the box safety. I do think that is where his best spot is. But I do want to, usually you're thinking of box safety. Maybe you're like Katano Ladapo is a little bit more your traditional kind of box safety. You're thinking of somebody a little bit taller, a little bit more physical. Somebody's going to be a little bit more of an intimidator. He's not that, but I do think he can be really good in that role. That's where I would probably play him most, is in that box safety role. But I do think he can play some in the slot, some in that post. I just don't think either of those are ultimately going to be his best overall positions. What can he bring to the Packers in 2024? I kept the exact same notes that I wrote down for Tyron Hopper. I think he will immediately bring competition to the table. I think he will be at worst, a really good depth piece at safety. I think he's going to immediately be a core special teams player. I think there will be some special packages where you can utilize him right away. I would not rule out the ability to give him a significant role if he comes in and hits the ground running like he already was starting to show a little bit in rookie mini camp. But I think he's probably a high-end role player, special teams player, and depth piece to begin with the ability to work into a larger role if he shows he can handle it. And I think he's going to be a very good scheme fit for this Jeff Hafley defense and another attacking player that he can use in a variety of different ways. Those are the exact same notes I had for Tyron Hopper, and it's the exact same notes here for Evan Williams. I think both of those are the exact same thing. I think they're totally true for both of them. My final thoughts here on Evan Williams, the tape was inconsistent. But I will say I really enjoyed watching him play. I think he's a really smart player. I wish he was a little bit more twitched up, just a tad bit more athletic. Didn't miss quite as many tackles. I think some of those things from a tackling standpoint need to get cleaned up. And there's always going to be a little bit of limitation to his game. But I do think he has some versatility. I think he's going to be best in the box. I have no issue whatsoever with them taking him in the 4th round. Was maybe moving up from a tad aggressive, maybe, but I have no issue with him in that 4th round pick whatsoever. I think it was a really solid pick for Goody and company. I think he's going to play a while in this league. I think he's going to have the opportunity to really help the Packers this season, certainly on special teams, but I think we will see him on defense a decent amount as well. I absolutely believe that you could have a 3 safety situation on the field at the same time with Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard, and Evan Williams all on the field at the same time. I think they're all versatile enough to be able to use them in a variety of different ways where you could pull that off. Whether one of them's in the slot or how you want to utilize that, we will have to wait and see. But I think there are absolutely ways you can get all 3 of those guys on the field at the same time. I think you have another very unique piece that's a little bit different than Xavier McKinney. That's a little bit different than Katana Oladapo. That's different than Anthony Johnson Jr. That's different than Javon Bullard. I think Evan Williams is a different safety, a different flavor than any of those other 4 that are probable to make the team. So I do like the fact that it gives them something a little bit different. And it'll give Jeff Hafley a different type of safety to utilize when he wants to or needs to. I do think he's going to be a leader out on the field, whether it's on defense or on special teams. And while I felt the Fresno tape was a bit better and that they used him a little bit better, I did like some of the ways that Oregon kind of unlocked him as a blitzer as well. And I think his overall experience at both places is really going to serve him well in Green Bay. And I'll say this too. He needs to improve his tackling. He's going to have those limitations to his game, but I do think that he has the true ability to become a player that is going to be on the field with some level of consistency long-term in Green Bay. I legitimately think that this could be a 8-9 year player in the league, maybe even longer, that has that special teams ability and is just their consistent, solid safety on the back end that maybe never gets to Pro Bowl, all pro level, anything like that. And maybe is sort of like a fringe starter, but is just always there and you can always rely on him to be one of your guys. And you might always want that Xavier McKinney next to him to be that playmaking safety. That's fine. You're going to need the type of player that Evan Williams is on your defense, and he's going to bring something unique to the table. And I think Packer fans are really going to enjoy watching him play football. All right, that is going to do it for me today. Shout out to our Hall of Fame and All-Pro members, Most Hated Minnesotan, PJ Wynn, John Wild, Shea Bradad, Brandon Paletta, Jennifer Wright, Boom Handle, Donald Lee, Lori Lord, Baby QB, David McCluskey, Donald Decker, Bremen, David Prendergast, Dan Miller, Alex Huang, Arnaldo Espinoza, and Michael Schipper. I will see you guys soon. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.